Now, part of the Muslim Public Affairs Council's 10th Annual Convention held in Los Angeles. American Muslim scholars, journalists, and religious leaders discuss the state of the Muslim community in America. This is just under 2 hours.
I have been very excited since we decided to do this format to be able to have the privilege of moderating this discussion. We decided this year as for our 10th annual convention to take our program to the next level, to make this as conversation-oriented as possible, and to engage a diverse set of voices, both from outside of our community and within our community, on some of the issues that are determining our lives and our livelihoods today, and the future of not only our community, but our country. And so this session is the fraternal twin of the earlier session. Whereas in the first session we talked about the state of the union, our country, we are in this session talking about the state of our ummah, our community. And the subtitle of that is Facing Our Challenges. The goal today, if we get it right with all of our panelists, is for us to have a candid conversation about truly what our challenges are. Over the course of the next 2 hours, it is our goal to talk about everything from identity to youth, to the role of imams, to the question of violent extremism and radicalization, to issues of gender, to issues of public perception, and whatever else you bring to the table, and of course, our viewers online bring to the table. So, one more reminder to please keep the center aisle clear because we have C-SPAN in the back. And if you see people walking down the center aisle, if you could be my friend and help get them out of the way, that would be much appreciated. So let me first introduce our amazing panel, which is a cross-section of the American Muslim Ummah and brings together people from academia, mosques, the private sector, media, stand-up comedy. It's a very wide range. We wanted to be diverse in age, in ethnicity, and in careers, and in all of the ways that we possibly can. So let me start from my right. We have Imam Suhaib Webb, who is best known as the resident scholar of the Muslim American Society, and who has been studying at Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt for a few years now, and is based at the MCA in Santa Clara as well, and is also a frequent blogger and a prolific thinker who also runs his own website, which is also a unique discussion forum. So next to him we have Aman Ali, who is a stand-up comedian, a journalist, and also the co-creator of a unique project called 30 Mosques in 30 Days, which began first as an effort last year, and we'll talk more about this, began first as an effort last year to go to 30 mosques in the 30 days of Ramadan in New York City, and this year expanded to 30 mosques in 30 states around the country during the month of Ramadan. And so we'll have a lot of national flavor to also share within that. Next to him, we have Imam Johari Abdul-Malik, who is the Director of Outreach for the al-Hijrah Islamic Center in Washington, D.C. He was also the first Muslim chaplain appointed to a university in the country at Howard University. And he also works with government relations for the Muslim Alliance in North America. To my left, we have Asma Uddin, who is the founder and editor-in-chief of altmuslima.com, the parallel track of altmuslim.com. And she is also a prolific blogger and is an attorney with the Beckett Fund. Next to her, we have Dr. Abdulaziz Sachedina, who is a professor of religion at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, also a prolific author and noted thinker. And finally, in the end, we have Dr. Maher, who is the co-founder of the Muslim Public Affairs Council and a prolific author himself, and a man I like to call one of the forefathers of the American Muslim community. So please join me in welcoming our panel. Okay, so let's get to it. I want to start with public perception, because this is what is, by and large, shaping our reality as Muslims in 2010. When we look at the year that we've had, you look at Park 51, you look at the planned Quran burning, you look at the assaults and the arson attempts on mosques around the country and on Muslims around the country, most recently an imam being attacked in the New York City subway system, and a host of other things that are going on. In light of that, a recent Pew Forum poll found that in a survey of over 1,000 American adults, that 49% of Americans believe that Islam is incompatible with American values. A full 49%, meaning half of Americans believe that Islam is incompatible with American values. So I want to ask a dicey question. Rather than thinking about why is it that people have the wrong idea, I want to ask a different question, which is, where have we gone wrong? What could we be doing better in order to change that reality? Who wants to start?
Nobody. I can get a shot at it. I think we'll solve the problem by reversing the question of the survey, that 49% of Americans consider Islamic values are incompatible with American values. I'd like to address this question to the Muslims. What's the percent of Muslims who believe that American values are compatible with Islam? And really, if we have an honest, candid answer to that, we'll put our foot on the first step towards a solution or a change.
If I may, and I'm not going to be too deep today. Right. I think there are some fundamental issues. The first is that, I mean, as a person who grew up in Brooklyn, I know that the average American is not us. The average American is pretty isolated. The average American that's living in some remote area, what's that thing they have on the late night show?
Which one?
Jaywalking, is it?
Yeah.
Right? Well, they ask Americans all kinds of questions that they should know, and they don't know where Colorado is. They don't know a lot. So, for half of the American people to know something about us is probably not as bad as we think it is. All right? The other part is that clearly this kind of subject was racially and socioeconomically biased. Because if you went in the black neighborhood, everybody thinks that Islam is compatible with what's going on in their neighborhood because most of them have Muslim relatives. They think it's a positive, transformative effect. You'd be like Malcolm X or somebody like that. So it depends on where the question is asked, and then how we weigh that 50% of the people seem to have gotten it right. That's not a bad thing. I really think that underneath this, there's really an even deeper question. And that is the question of when are we going to have our values impact not inside the masjid, right? We tried to create a fortress with the Islamic school and the masjid and the community center, and we just live in the bubble. And that was an idea that we had, that we want to kind of all live together. Now the real challenge for us is, can we put our Islam in the street? Can we let the art, the culture, the song, the spirit of Islam flow out of the masjid and into the community? No applause, please.
I think he touches on something that is crucial in this discussion, and that is that we have to be Amin before we can be Nabi. I think what we've tried as a community in many cases is to have religious authority in America, to have a religious voice. But the Prophet wasn't a religious voice until he was a voice of character and etiquette. So we have to, as he mentioned, I think it's more important, unfortunately, no offense to you at all, no offense to myself either, we have a Muslim cleric, a Muslim comedian. I think we just need to be comedians and clerics. And then people will say, wow, why do they conduct themselves in this manner? So before the Prophet ﷺ could have religious authority, he had authority through his character. To the point that Abu Sufyan, who hated the Prophet at that time, when the Prophet married his daughter, and that was the height of his war with the Prophet, so to speak. They told him, your daughter married Muhammad. He said, I could think of no one better for her to marry than him. I just don't like the guy. So I think we have a responsibility. Number one, I don't think that we are giving a message that's really American. And I say that as a convert to Islam. A lot of us, when we convert to Islam, we learn how to wear shawar kamises, eat 5-alarm chili, it's called biryani or whatever, and we kind of adopt a culture which is not really our own, and then we're ineffective with our own people. We adopt ideas about gender, ideas about community, which we never had before, due to certain trends within the community. And then secondly, we have to gain authority of character and the respect of people before they're going to listen to what we have to say about religion. If people think you're killing them, they're not going to care what religion you're bringing to them.
And I think with that poll, I mean, I don't know who did that one poll. That was
Pew Forum.
Okay. I mean, in many of these cases, when it says like 49% thinks Islam's not compatible with American values, I always look at how many of those people have actually met a Muslim. And so, understandably so. So when it comes to people having unfavorable views of Islam, a lot of it has to deal with ignorance or not even knowing Muslims. And I think if you want to say where do we go wrong, I don't really look at it as where we went wrong because hindsight's kind of 20/20. I think just to be somewhat critical is we focus so much on the spirituality aspect of it, and I don't want to say that we should downplay that, but we forget about, as the Imam said, character, but about humanizing Muslims. Like, he makes a good point talking about not just clerics, but comedians and things like that. Like, if you look at our history,
See, well, here's one of our challenges. Until probably 5 years ago, comedians were haram, music was haram.
Right.
So we're just coming as a community
for sure.
into the acceptance.
I'm saying if you look at our history, Islam was not just had the most profound thinkers. They had the best people in medicine, the best people in science, the best people in sports and architecture, things like that. We have athletes, we have entertainers, we have things like that are doing that. And I think we need to humanize ourselves, and we all play a role. It's not just comedians, entertainers, or politicians, or clerics, or things like that. It's people that work at their office jobs, just getting involved at the local school boards and things like that. And so I think that's what we need to do now is just play more of a presence. Yes, talk about our deen and talk about our religion and our values, but just interact with people, have friends, and just hang out with people. And that was one of the most interesting things that we took from this project is there's always this perception we as Muslims have of, oh, they hate us, they're mad at us, and we can't even step outside the door without someone throwing a rock at us. But I feel like people don't realize and don't give America credit for how embracing they really are. And our project, we went to 30 states in 30 days. It was a testament to that. Yes, we had problems in terms of backlash or opposition, things like that, but to say that was even remotely reflective of most average Americans is ridiculous.
Okay, I want to actually use that as a segue to introduce a little bit more about 30 mosques in 30 days. The project was unique and I think in many ways groundbreaking at a time when Muslims are trying to better understand how to share their values with other Americans, and at the same time many Americans are also trying to better understand Muslims. And so I want to show a brief video from footage that CNN actually did covering one leg of 30 mosques in 30 days, the southern end of the journey. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what you gained from that experience. Everybody else stay and I'll just get out of the way so everybody can see. So let's cut to the CNN video.
Look like Spike Lee. Fight the power. You look like Spike Lee.
So far, we are at one mosque only.
We're still in the parking lot.
Well, if there's anybody who needs prayer, it's those two guys right there.
Still in the parking lot.
Ya Rab.
CNN hung out with us for 3 days during the trip.
My name is
Prayed with
Aman
us.
Ali. I am the co-creator of 30 Mosques in 30 Days, where my partner Bassam Tark and I are traveling to a different mosque in a different state each night for the month of Ramadan. I think it's a little bit of everything. Ramadan is obviously a month of spiritual purification, so that's part of it. I've always been the adventure kind of person, though. I've always been the person that loved to just go on road trips. So this gives me an opportunity to kind of mix those two interests that I want: the whole spiritual purification and the road trip adventure as well. My friends have always been supportive of this, but like, dude, that's insane. You're driving almost 12,000 miles, across the country, driving every single day. And I've never done anything even remotely as crazy like this before, but it just made me want to do it even more.
So we get on the highway in Atlanta and we start heading towards the south, down to Jacksonville. And as we're driving on the highway, we see this huge, massive Confederate flag just waving in the air. We all agree in the car that this place is too racistly awesome to pass without taking a photo. And we go towards the place, and it turns out that the flag is next to this Confederate souvenir shop. And there's a couple guys sitting on a bench in front of the shop as we're pulling in, and they're basically right in front of our car as we're pulling in, and they're just giving us this kind of almost like a dirty look, you know, at least what I interpreted to be a dirty look, and they're all just staring at us as we pull in, and everyone else in the car is like, no, we're not going in, no, we're not going in, no, we're not going in, and I'm the kind of person, when you tell me not to do something, that just motivates me even more to do it, and I'm like, you guys are sissies, like, I'm going in, and as soon as I step outside the car, the people on the bench are like, hey, great weather today, isn't it? You know, welcome. And even the guy inside was just as cool, and he was welcoming us, giving us support, talking all about his shop, and he's like, man, I'm friendly to everyone. I'm so sick of Confederate flag getting such a bad rap and all the racist connotations from the Civil War that people associate with it. You know, I accept people here from all walks of life, and I've got people from this country and this country that come visit. And we let us take his pictures. He took pictures of us. This was a really, really cool guy. And here I was, you know, walking into this place, expecting that this guy was going to be prejudiced towards me because of my skin color or because of me being a Muslim. And what ended up happening was I was being prejudiced towards him because I thought that these guys were bigoted, you know, rednecks, you know, whatever you want to call them. And it was really very unique learning experience for me, you know, kind of realizing, you know, the personal baggage that I bring to the table when I meet people.
We're right now in a very, I think, troubling time right now in America. I'll admit it. I really think so. I think things are very difficult right now in America. And the accepting nation that my parents first came into about 20 so years ago, it just doesn't feel like it's the same country anymore. And I don't know. I really, but a part of me still feels it's there. So going on this road trip, it's one of those journeys to really see how broad of a definition of America are people willing to accept. And, you know, I think that's what I'm really out here trying to see. I really hope that non-Muslims draw from this project that, I think there's one thing that they draw, it's that a lot of this is just a part of their community, and I hope they accept that. That what we're covering is not some fringe group, but it's a part of the American fabric. And if we can get that through, and if people really feel like, okay, you know what, these guys ain't so bad.
So Aman, I want you to talk a little bit about where did the idea for 30 mosques come from, and what did you hope to learn and accomplish, and maybe what were some of the surprises along the way, like one that you shared in the video? It was kind of an impulse, like, because we started the project in just New York City last year, and Bassam, my friend, and I, who's the other guy in the project, we're neither of us are native New Yorkers. We live in New York, but I mean, we love the city, but it's not our home, originally, that is. And one of us said to the other, the first night of Ramadan last year, like, hey, wouldn't it be crazy if we went to a different mosque every day in New York City? And we posted it on Facebook and Twitter, and people just started commenting left and right, like, hey man, that's so cool, you should blog about it. I'm like, why would I blog about this? Like, nobody's gonna read that. Like, I don't like blogs. Like, 2 people are gonna look at it. Like, I don't have time for that. But they kept insisting. And from there, we finally, after day 2 or 3, like, fine, we'll put up the blog just to shut them up. Here's the blog. And we were not only getting emails from our family and friends, it was people from across the city, then it was across the country, then it was like people in China, Luxembourg. I'm like, dude, I don't even know where that is, but that's awesome. And in England, and then like national media were calling us up. And it just showed me that there's this thirst, there's this hunger for substantive portrayals of Muslims. There's lots of shouting for Muslims and against Muslims, but there's no substance. When you talk about people blocking a mosque for whatever reason, people don't even know who Muslims are, going back to that poll. And what we were trying to do with this project really wasn't trying to preach. We weren't trying to respond to any controversies, anything like that. I know Ground Zero was going on as we were doing it. Yes, we talked about it, but this wasn't a response to it. We just wanted to show people what Muslims were like. And we talked about the positive things, we talked about the negative things. We got plenty of dirty laundry. We talked about that. We talked about
unfortunately, it has nothing to do with Islam, but with some cultures with interracial marriage, how they frown upon that. We talked about Muslims working in liquor stores. Islam prohibits alcohol, and we talked about what it's like for them.
You mean working or owning?
Both. In Vegas, Islam prohibits gambling, and it's very clear and explains why. We talked to Muslims that work in casinos, and we talked about that struggle and things like that. And we didn't want to like bash Muslims, but we wanted to just get into those substantive issues. And I don't know if there's a photo that you guys could go to real quick. The photo to me that captures Muslims in America is in this photo. We took it on Eid, and as soon as we took this photo, we were like, we're done. This is who Muslims are in this country.
We don't get to see it.
You got it? Oh, go back. That is Muslims in America. This was taken in a basement. We took this photo at a basement and just Muslims smiling and having a good time. And that to me was the essence of our project. And words can summarize it any way they want, but like that photo really captures that portrayal. And so when it comes to like these controversies, yes, you know, hate crimes, racial profiling, backlash, people getting beaten up and profiled at airports, things like that. I don't want to downplay the severity of that, but to say that that reflects my lifestyle at all is ridiculous. Like, I'm on the road probably about a fourth of the year, and for the most part, I don't really have problems flying. Like, okay, here and there, have some horror stories, things like that, but those aren't the issues. The conversations we were hearing at the masjid is, hey, my mortgage, how am I going to pay the mortgage? What kind of public schools should I put my kids in? My wife won't let me watch the game. These things aren't unique to Muslims. Right. These are issues, and that's what we wanted to get into, was talk about that. So instead of talking about that, we talked about fatherhood, and we talked to a guy, and I could go on and on with stories, but like we talked to a dude who's he's a truck driver. He's on the road like 2/3 of the year. Talked about what it's like for him for missing his kid's soccer practice and his daughter's ballet class and things like that. And the idea of a man providing for his kids. Those are the issues that are affecting Muslims, just like anybody else. And I think we're not talking about those enough in relation with the other spiritual issues as well.
Okay.
If I could just chime in. Probably, has anybody here ever seen any of us on television? Raise your hand if you've seen any of us here on television. Probably every time you saw one of us on television, something bad was happening.
Yes. True.
And that's the narrative that we have to change. That we need to be talking about things that are interesting to other Americans. I don't know if Muslims not making their mortgage is exciting,
right,
but for people to see Muslims, and especially our leadership at a time when it's not a crisis.
Right.
Because if that is the case, then we always become framed as the crisis people.
I think another angle of this conversation that I want to bring in is precisely this idea that people don't get to see enough of this, which is an internal conversation among Muslims about the issues that are going on within our communities. And so I'm curious, particularly I want to turn to you, Dr. Sachedina and Asma, and thinking about the kinds of, what is the internal dialogue that you think America needs to hear and needs to see, based on your own vantage points?
I think that we need to ask tougher questions. It's easy to build mosques than to build minds in the mosque. We need... The Prophet ﷺ made a prediction. There will come a time when, as he said, "Masajidukum amiratun khaliyatun min al-huda." Your mosques will be large, decorated. It will be empty of guidance. And I think what we are faced with is a real issue. It's not building a mosque, it's building the mind in a mosque. If the same survey that was done by Pew Foundation, let's do a survey in the mosque, ask our own people in the mosque, how many are they believing whether we have the values that are compatible with our life in America? That's the question we need to ask. How many of us think in the mosque that pluralism is important, tolerance is important, civil society is important? Because we haven't even learned it among ourselves. those tolerance, those moments of recognition of one another is totally absent. In our own mosques, we don't encourage tolerance. Our imams don't speak about civil society. So the kind of information that we are getting from our imams in the mosque, how are we going to have a voice in the public if that voice doesn't change? We are talking about curriculum. We are talking about creating the minds. How many of our parents today, Muslim parents, are sending our boys and girls in the college to study religious studies, to do humanities, to do social sciences? They are mostly in engineering, they are mostly in professional schools. We don't have enough professors who can teach Islamic studies in this country. And these are the professors who will be trained, who will come and become influential. By the way, it's worth remembering, academia plays a major role in the public opinion formation. And we need to have information. And our way of informing our public, even our own congregation, is weak at this point. And we really need a lot of work in developing curriculum that is compatible. I say, and again I repeat, building mosque is not going to solve the problem. What is going to solve the problem is to get the imam who is native to America. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, وَلْتَكُنْ مِنْكُمْ يَدُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ. There has to be people who are among you to lead you into your religious faith, not coming from Egypt or Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or India. There will have to be Native Americans to teach us. And they will teach us the way we ought to be taught. This is, I think, reflection. We need to be very honest what we are doing in the mosque, what we are doing with our religion. Like the Imam said, we need to show the character. And the strength of the Muslim character should be such that you should raise the question, what the Prophet raised, Ud'u an-nas ila sabili rabbikum bi'a'amalikum. Call people to the path of God with your action, not with your da'wah, with your language, but you need to show in your character what exactly you stand for. And I think the moment you do that, you have an influence. My students come to me and say, Professor, we want to learn praying. I'm not supposed to teach praying in the university, but they come. They want to learn the Quran. Oh yeah, in the university, Muslim students don't need to learn about Islam. They know everything about Islam. They are experts in Islam. They can write a letter, they can write opinions about Professor. Don't take a course with him on Islam because he will mislead you. Why he will mislead you? Because he talks about democracy. He talks about women's rights. He talks about the imams to be men and women all together. This is what we do in the university, my friends. Let's wake up for once to see how we can have an impact in American society. This society is open for us. It is ours if we know how to make it. And we have to begin exactly where we need to begin, is the source of information. What kind of information we can give.
Hold on,
go ahead.
Asma.
So I just wanted to address a couple of points. First, Edina's question, and then an issue that Professor Sachedina brought up. On the question of showcasing the diversity within our community, there's definitely the element that Aman brought up in terms of just the humanity and the everyday issues that are important to us. And then we share with fellow Americans. But there's also the diversity in terms of our intellectual discourse and the ways that we respond to common questions. And I think one of the things that I do at altmuslimah.com, it's really a forum that I describe as both an inter and intra-community dialogue. Inter in terms of so many of the conceptions of gender in Islam often come in the shape of women being oppressed and Muslim men being violent. And it's very black and white and very simplified. And to complicate that, from an inter-community perspective, what I really essentially do is showcase this discussion happening within the community about so many different perspectives and different ways that people are struggling with gender questions in our faith, in our community. It could be issues ranging from the question of dress and of wearing the headscarf to the question of co-ed interaction and whether Muslim women should be able to marry non-Muslim men. There's so much diversity there. And that, I think, really showcases humanity in a very strong and compelling way. And then a question that both Professor Sachedina raised and also Dr. Hathout earlier about this question of to what extent are Muslims in America and Muslims generally really beginning, how much do they think that there's a parallel between so-called Western values and Muslim values? And this is a question that I actually deal with in my other role, and my role as an international law attorney. And I deal with religious freedom issues and free speech issues, and a lot of my work is done internationally. And the issue that I consistently keep seeing, whether it's dealing with high-level officials in Cairo to the Constitutional Court in Indonesia, is that when I'm trying to challenge them on issues of, for instance, the blasphemy laws, the idea is always like, well, first of all, we believe in free speech, but there should be red lines in free speech. So there's always this prominence placed on limitations as opposed to the broad free speech or broad rights in themselves. And then there's also the idea that, well, all these rights that you're talking about and all these international treaties that you're arguing under are really based on, again, a Western code. And there's just no compatibility because we are a Muslim nation and we are distinct from this Western code. And moreover, in the US, there is no sort of appreciation or respect for religion the way that it is in our society. And of course, that's completely not true. There's a vibrant space for religion in the public square in the US. And so one level of this is definitely ignorance, and then to the extent that we see this parallel phenomenon in the US, we definitely see this need to self-ghettoize. Do we find comfort and power in saying that we're somehow better and we have to position ourselves in contrast to the broader society and their values? And I think that the biggest way of getting past that this sort of impasse is to understand there is common humanity, and there's so many people in our society who are religious. They're religious from other faiths, but there's so much commonality there just because of these common faith discourses.
It's interesting. I think, Suhaib, you can kind of chime in. I converted to Islam almost 30 years ago. I didn't hear the word maqasid al-sharia till about 7 years ago. Right? The idea that we were not having a discourse about what this whole thing is really about. What are the objectives, the goals of our faith? We weren't talking about those. We were talking about how long is your pants leg and whether you can wear this or not wear that. So that now I think our community is really maturing. I'd like us not to feel so bad about ourselves. We've come a long way. We have ramped up in a way that I don't think people expected. 9/11 was a great tragedy. But after 9/11, this community galvanized itself in a way that really shocked many people. And America, oddly enough, shocked itself. That we didn't have a Rwanda effect. That we had a dialogue of civilizations, not a clash of civilizations. And out of that discourse, there are some challenges that we have. And that is the challenge to the medieval narrative. We wouldn't have touched women's rights if it were not for the fact that after 9/11, the Quran was sold out. You get to chapter 4, hey, what about this? Now you've got millions of Americans in universities and other places asking questions. And it's at that place that it challenges our traditional thinking. And I'm also going to say, we have to recognize in America the importance of popular culture. That if Islam is not going to have an impact on popular culture, then it's not going to make it in the future. And I know we have an ex-rapper or something here, right? And a future comedian. That was really funny. That once we make that engagement, and it's already happening in different ways, but we have to promote it. I mean, Doc, when you're saying that there are people now who, if you tell them, my son's going to be a playwright, right, like Wajahat Ali, but the work that Wajahat is doing in that play is edifying so many people about subjects that are not safe to talk about in the masjid.
Yes.
They're not safe to talk about how Muslims feel about the wars. But the spoken word artist, Amir Suleiman, is a poet and a rapper who's giving voice to that to young people in a space that it's safe rather than being on the internet and become radicalized. So I mean,
it's
go ahead.
Your success, Imam Johari, by the way, that being a Native American, you're able to tease out the topics that are very, I think, essential to the formation of our identity as American Muslims. And I think many of the leaders that I come across in my travels, even in North America alone, I find that they are not as consonant with the understanding of the values with which we need to work, with the situation that we are confronted with. I think that's what I'm talking about, a new generation of the imams, new generations of the leaders, which should actually include also the women. Women participation is extremely important because we have been all the time representing Muslim women. We men do talk about their rights. They need to tell us what are their rights. And we need to be listeners for a time, you know, and we should listen to them.
All right, so on this point then, first I want to translate Maqasid al-Sharia for our C-SPAN audience, which is the goals or the objectives of Sharia, the Islamic law. And so if we use Arabic terms, let's make sure that we translate. Secondly, let's transition then to thinking about what is the role of a mosque in America today. We've talked about issues of gender, we've talked about issues of youth. People are touching on some of these related issues that go back to the role of imams today and fundamentally to the role of mosques. What should the role of a mosque be today to address the needs of today?
What it is or what it should be.
You can take it either way.
What it is now, most of the mosques are institutions to treat homesickness. It's true. This is why I go to the mosque, because I miss Egypt. So if I go to an Egyptian mosque, I am kind of feeling comfortable. The only thing that is missing, they don't play Kulthum there. So I still have part of...
You have to translate Kulthum.
Kulthum.
Wow.
The mother of Kulthum. No.
Well, at least for our C-SPAN audience, she's the Ella Fitzgerald of Egypt.
Kulthum is the greatest singer in Egypt, in Egyptian modern history. So most of the this is why when I go to the mosque, issues that was brought here, I find that it is not exactly Egypt. That Pakistani guy sitting next to me wants to have a quota of Pakistanis in the board. Then even in the cafeteria, we have to be politically correct. So I went to mosques. They have the spicy table for the Pakistani and the non-spicy table for the wimpis, for the Arabs. And interestingly, they say it. This is the Pakistani table, this is the Arab table. So
I have news for you. If you went to the 30 mosques, the Pakistanis won the food war.
And this also, I was curious about the 30 days, the 30 mosques. If they are in 30 cities during the month of Ramadan, you will not fast then. You will be a traveler. Technically. You can use this technicality anyway. Get a fatwa from Suhaib Webb or from Imam Johari and you'll be in good shape. But really, this is why when I find that it is not exactly Egyptian, I either nudge those Pakistanis out or I make their life hell inside the mosque, or they nudge me out. Yeah. So the mosque becomes two mosques and we say Allahu Akbar. We were one mosque, we became two mosques. Then we became four mosques and we keep dividing. I got scolded for saying we divide the way the bacteria divides. And we are celebrating. And this is a miserable state of the affairs because it would lead us to what Professor Sachedina said. The imams don't speak about civic engagement because they don't know. How would they speak about something they don't know? The worst thing is sometimes they speak and they say it is kufr. So I'm very, very content if they don't speak. So what we need really is a reform of our ideas, a reform movement, a reform intellectual movement, that without it, I know that the word reform makes some people jittery. I'm not saying reform Islam. I'm saying reform our understanding of Islam and reform the composition of the Muslim and the Muslim mind to shift from a mind that is receiving like a cassette recorder to a mind that's critical.
I think you wrote a book on this subject before.
Yeah, I was hoping that nobody read it. But
All right, I want to turn, if I can, to Imam Suhaib. Based on your experiences being, traveling all over the country and interacting with a lot of different masajid, in addition now to your experiences at Al-Azhar, I've read recent interviews where you've talked a lot about how, this time to think about how to sort of re-engage the Muslim American scene and thinking about the role of and the need for indigenous imams, American trained, imams who can handle the current issues and challenges facing Muslim American youth and broader communities at large. What can you share with us?
There's a few points I'll make, not to offend anyone here, but I think using imams as a universal is unfair. The imams are saying bad things, or the imams are anti-pluralism, or the imams are anti-social justice. So I just want to say it would be like us saying the social activists and the bloggers.
The Muslims,
And I think using universals is always a very problematic issue. Most of the imams, actually, since I've come back to America, honestly, from Imam Majid in Adams to Imam Ahmad in Oklahoma, most of them are actually talking about social justice issues. And many of them are at the forefront of getting the wall knocked down and allowing sisters to play a much greater role in the community. So I think it's very important. The imam, I'm not really sure what we're talking about. It's like,
so hey, in fact, let me just, most masajid in America don't have an imam.
Right.
Yes.
Right? They have somebody
we
who
have
volunteers.
uncles. No, we have uncles.
You have uncles.
Right.
Right? So even within that, the ones that you're talking about who really are the imams, full-time, responsible, most of them are on what you're saying, but the other mosques don't have one.
But what Imam Suhaib is saying is right on the mark. Generalization is always a slippery
Yes.
slope.
Exactly.
And it leads to, actually, it is a form of injustice.
Yeah.
So we have to try to...
So I'm worried, like, for example, let's say I know some imams who are not really from the choir. Okay, and I want to invite them to MPAC, and they hear that, well, the imams. They're going to be like, do these people use indefinite articles ever? I mean, it's a constant universal. So I think we have to be very careful. On the other end, also talking to imams about using also false universals. But I went to Egypt 7 years ago. I went to Azhar and converted to Islam in 1992 from the hip hop. My first sheikh was Rakim and Chuck D. And a lot of what I learned with my wife and my children, I took them with me to Egypt. And my wife, really, without her, I wouldn't have been able to do it, is just to realize that faith in this age is negotiated. We are no longer in an era where faith can be forced on anyone. Allah says in the Quran, La ikraha fi din. So living in Egypt and being a little older, I went to Egypt in my early 30s, I realized, first of all, the important role that we have as American Muslims, because we have the ability to embrace the pluralistic message of the Prophet in a way that's very unique. Because as you said something very interesting now, that at the table you'll find the biryanis and the mahshi, but when are we going to find the mashed potatoes, the cornbread, and the fried chicken?
Exactly.
And I think that goes back to the earlier point of why the Americans don't know us.
Don't forget the bean pie, my brother.
And the bean pie. And for some of us, a protein shake.
Yes.
Point being that when I lived in Egypt, and I don't want to make Egyptians mad at me because I know they're a little sensitive. I learned, ala ra'si, yani ala ra'si, wallah. But I learned what not to do. And I really realized that for me to be successful in light of Islam, not in light of what people think, I have to be ethically committed to being an American imam. I cannot come back like, Bolak ya Maulana, speaking like Egyptian dialect. I have to come back with like, somebody say, how? I have to come back with that. But what I did realize is that faith, did I just do that? Faith. So wave your hands. So faith is negotiated. And the job of the mosque, and I'm the youngest person probably to you, is that we have to facilitate people's ability to negotiate their faith. You talk to young Muslims in America, we're doing a camp a month or a few weeks from now here. the number one topic of young professionals who graduated from Berkeley, Stanford, USC is we have doubts about Islam. Now, we have serious concerns. Women in our community who are taking Prozac because they're looking at a wall their whole life and they're told that you're part of a community, right? Are we facilitating that negotiation? Is it wrong to doubt? You know, the Prophet said, Ibrahim has a greater right on us, and he said, you know, Arini kayfa tuhyi al-mawta, show me how you cause life and death. So I think the job of a mosque is to facilitate, number one, a larger definition of what our community is. If you look at the time of the Prophet, the sinner was at his mosque. The drunk man in Bukhari Sahih, the first thing he does when he gets drunk is he goes to the mosque in Medina. And the first person he asks for is the Prophet. Because he trusts the ability of the mosque and the leader of the mosque to facilitate this negotiation. He's not an indicter, he's an inviter. He's not condemning, he's opening. He said, Kullu bani adam khata. Everyone makes mistakes. And the best of those who make mistakes are those who turn back to God.
That's right.
So being able to allow people, and in every book in theology you find Iman increases and decreases. For some reason in our masjid we think the Iman is always, you know, ihsan.
Faith.
Yeah.
Whereas Iman increases and decreases. Are we going to facilitate people's ability to struggle and negotiate religion in a transmodern world? Are we going to crush their ability to do that? So I think it's important for imams really to embrace. And I'll say something, as I am Suhaib Webb, I think so. I'm lonely in the mosques. I don't have anyone to watch Monday Night Football with. No, I'm saying honestly, I can watch Abu Treka. And I'm an American convert of 20 years. And I'm running into converts who are not dissatisfied from a point of theology and worship, but they're dissatisfied from a point of community.
So hey, let me chime in.
So can I just, so I think it's important to facilitate that negotiation and allow people to grow, make mistakes. Allow your imams to make mistakes.
Exactly. Absolutely.
You know, I've said some things, next thing I know it's a whole entire blog post.
Right.
Just basically trying to destroy me. I'm like, subhanallah, yani, I'm not al-yuha, ilay. I'm a person.
Translate.
So we need, revelation is not being given to me. So we have to allow each other room. We're still prepubescent as a community. We're going through growing pains. We can't just be, you know, strict modernists with a bunch of rules and principles and tell people this is how it has to be.
Absolutely.
It's not going to work that way.
Imam Johari and then Dr. Sachedina.
I'm sorry.
We had,
No,
I mean,
please.
I think the exchange is good, you know. But I had a group of journalists come to our masjid, and they were doing a study on why people came to houses of worship, Christians, Jews, Hindus, etc. And I said, well, I know you haven't finished your study, but can we break the seal on what it is that you know so far? He said, well, let me tell you what we learned. We learned that in worship there are two axes. I'm not having a Christian flashback. One axis is you want to have a relationship with God, a relationship that's transcendent. But then you also want in religion to have a horizontal axis where you have fellowship. He said, we discovered that in the church and the synagogue and the other places, people primarily go for the horizontal axis, to have fellowship, to have ministries with one another. And in the masjid, they go to have a vertical relationship. So their concern is the hadith said that the reward is 25 or 27 times, so they want a high-speed dial-up in the masjid, right? So as many people as they can get to pray, and they have that Egyptian flashback or whatever flash. So they say, like, we are really connected to Allah because there's so many people here with us. But if you died, and we had this in my masjid, an old man, he used to sit in the corner in the front on the left-hand side. Nobody knew his name. Because the only thing that they needed him for was to fill in the gaps. And they were happy to see him so that he would fill the gap. But the issues of having community, it is something that we as Muslims have to learn from the other faith traditions in America. And they have something to learn from us.
How many mosques have you seen with a visitor cards?
Yeah.
When I went to church,
Oh, yeah.
you couldn't walk in a church house without getting tackled by someone who didn't know you with a big hug and saying, welcome, brother, here's a visitor card. And just the idea of negotiating faith is important because what that does is allow us to consider other factors which affect that relationship. Sex in our community is a big issue. No one talks about it, right?
Except in the MSA.
Yeah.
And even then.
Muslim.com does a good job.
Oh yeah, the Muslim Matrimonial Society.
Issue of creedal problems that people are running into, just dealing with modernity as a whole is affecting how they negotiate their faith. Marital problems that are just swept under the rug, right? Spousal abuse, abuse of children is happening in our community. We're not really talking about it. And our rug is so big now, if we walk in the front room, we're going to trip and fall over, right? And also the idea of loneliness. Something I've noticed since I've come back 3 months in America only is at the larger communities, I find people are more lonely.
Yeah.
So I was at an Eid prayer where there were like 12,000 people. Afterwards, I had dinner with a friend I've known for a number of years and his wife. And he said, you know, we just have one problem here. And I was like, what? He said, we're lonely. Like, how could you be lonely? You just set 12,000 people here, right? And he said, well, they're good at having events after events, saving the world. Muslims are, you know, on the cusp, as he talked about, focusing on these things. But he said, we don't really have community building functions. We're nationally connected, but we're not locally connected.
Yeah.
So negotiating will cause us to look at a number of factors.
Absolutely. Dr. Sachedina.
Yes, I think what we are missing in this conversation is that the mosques are dealing only with few people. There's a larger community that does not participate in the mosque activities.
The unmosqued.
Yes, this is the silent majority that you don't hear about. And the mosque has become a kind of a social club for those who are like-minded in some way, and it is perfectly all right. But like my Christian colleagues say that we have Wednesday night gathering or we have a Sunday gathering. People come, those who are faithful, they come, but we also are worried about those who don't come. I think we have still not opened our conversations to find out why are there few people coming to the mosque? Why aren't there more people, participating in the activities of the mosque? Yeah, Jum'ah we gather, fine. But let's see other occasions. If there are no Eid prayers, we will not even know the number of the community, the number of the people that are in the community. There must be something missing. That we have the young people not coming. There are professionals who don't come. They are not satisfied with what is being delivered in the mosque. So we really are looking for, is the role of the mosque only to cater for the needs of those who are converted? Or is the mosque to be interested in those who are least interested and bring them into the mosque so that they can also benefit from its moral and spiritual values? I think we are not opening up the discussion of why we are not getting enough people to come.
Well, go
Hold
ahead.
on, let me let Asma jump in here.
Yeah,
Go
I mean,
ahead,
I think that, a really relevant aspect of the question you're discussing in terms of the mosques and its role in our negotiation of our lived reality is the women question. I mean, there's so many identity crises that begin at the mosque for many women because they go and it's just sort of like, well, the space for you is sort of the back door in that cramped space where
Or
you're
the basement.
where you have to stay with the children because the children can't go in the men's space because the men's space need to be quiet and they need to focus.
It's true. Very true.
I mean, there was an article on Al-Muslim called Damami, Why Are Women in the Back? And this idea that, even just in terms of raising our children, raising our daughters, it's like everywhere else out there outside the mosque that we are constantly told you can achieve whatever you want to achieve, you can be at the top of your game. But as soon as you get into the mosque, where are you put? You're put in the back. And then we have another article that says women behaving badly in mosques. And that was actually in response to a number of misogynistic comments that were left about how you can't really have any sort of breakdown in strict gender segregation in the mosque in terms of men and women praying side by side or front and back even. Because women don't know how to behave themselves. Their space is always, they're really noisy and they don't dress properly. And these are all these things that all of us have heard, I'm sure. And
Men don't dress improperly, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah,
but the problem,
properly.
the problematic aspect
Skinny
of that,
jeans.
yeah, and I've definitely heard of that as well.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Let's put a visual out there.
Yeah, but the problematic aspect of that commentary wasn't so much, 'cause I think we had all heard it, but it was like it was being attributed to there being women. I mean, could there be anything more misogynist? As opposed to thinking, well, let's take a look. You know, women are at most might get a screen, if that, if it's working. It's nothing different from being at home watching on television or listening to on the radio. There's no sort of connection with the person giving the speech. So why am I going to feel that I need to act differently just because I don't have that sense of connection? And furthermore, what does it say that we're actually giving this space to women and preserving the men's space for a silent, calm place? It's like, what does that say about how we're valuing women's spirituality and the importance of that, especially vis-a-vis men? And then there's just so many more aspects to that, even in terms of like childcare. Why is childcare relegated only to the women's space?
Well, one thing that's interesting, I think, also is our view of our own sexuality. And what I feel sometimes is we're very uncomfortable to the point that in a mosque that I was in a few years ago, and I'm sorry to interrupt you and I apologize also, they have the security apparatus in the back for the sisters, the non-see-through glass, where they could see out and men couldn't see in.
The bulletproof, yeah.
The bulletproof, yeah. The banker windows. Right. So what happened was they started turning off the lights to pray on that side, and an older woman contacted me and said, you know, I've been praying for years with the lights on. And when they turn off the lights, the kids just, of course, you know, when you turn off the lights, the little kids are going to go crazy. And so I contacted the head of Sisters Community, whoever, you know, and I asked her what's going on. She said, well, there's men staring at us through that stuff. So I said to her, you know, we live in an age of internet porn. I mean, I'll be really Suhaib with you, not frank with you. We live in an age of, you know, sexuality, the pornification of society. If a man is coming to the mosque to look through that window at 65-year-old aunties in ruku, he has a psychological problem that goes beyond the mosque.
That's right.
I mean, you don't go to the mosque, to get hot. I mean, and I hate to say it that way. And I think that goes back to one thing, we're not really comfortable with who we are. Are you telling me if we take the wall down in the mosque and sisters pray behind us, it's going to turn into XXX?
Right.
What type of community are you?
Yeah.
I mean, and honestly, some people have that mentality. Well, you know, if we look at the sisters, you know, what? If you go every day outside and you look at everyone from Halle Berry to Ashwarari, and you seem to have no problem with that.
Right.
But you come into the mosque,
You've been in Egypt
and I have a daughter. No, I have a daughter. Yeah, I don't take my daughter to certain mosques.
Yeah, that's
because you're talking now about psychology.
Right.
I'm an educator. My degree is in education. The old, huge public schools were torn down and built with new schools simply because of the mindset of the child and his understanding of education. We're not appreciating the maslaha. We constantly talk about the benefit, the public benefit. But the majority of great scholars of Islamic law said that maslaha, public benefit, not only is regulated to the tangible, but deals with the emotional state of people also.
Right.
So if we're going to talk about maqasid, objectives of Sharia, maslaha, what benefits our community, we have to listen to what she's saying. Women are not living a dignified religious existence in our community.
I want to add, I want to add a question, and you can keep going. But I want to just add in a layer that is introduced by a question that we received through our webcast from Sultana in London. We're being listened to and participated in as far as London. Who is asking also on the layer of young people. We put the issues of women, youth, and sadly are in many ways interchangeable, because what it says is sort of the otherization within the mosque space. Those who feel that their space is not as equal as other space. And so Sultana asks, how do we support young people? And what do we need to give them to skillfully navigate between the different aspects of their identities?
We need to create the culture in which we operate and which we live. We are importing cultures from outside that are creating disconsonance, disconnect, because these are the issues that are so important in the home countries. And we are importing them without calculating what kind of damage it could do to the dignity of a woman, or what could it do to young people. We are not even calculating that. We are simply importing whatever was, I'm constantly told in the mosque, this is how we used to do. Okay, but this is how you were doing it in a different context. Now you are living in a different context. You need to create your identity in this context, and there's nothing wrong. I teach in the classroom in the month of Ramadan, and I can tell you that My women students are not even covered half. My men students are more covered in summer than my women students are. Now, it's the month of Ramadan that I'm teaching, for example. Should I stop teaching? I don't stop teaching because I don't deal with the disease that I have in my heart. I don't allow those things to come in. How come we in the community are constantly raising questions about this whole thing as if everything between men and women is nothing but sexuality? It is wrong. I have women who are sisters of me. They look at in my eyes and talk. And there's nothing that happens to us. I think, why is this so? I'm simply saying. I'm simply underscoring our ability to train ourselves. This is what Islam wanted. That we should train ourselves to a level whereby we don't need this kind of checks and balances. So we can go in the society and function in all honesty, in all dignity, and preserve the dignity of other human being, whether she happens to be a woman, or he happens to be a man, or a black, or white. All these things are connected with our training.
May I, Edina?
Sure. Okay.
I just have, I am agreeing, I am actually ultimately enjoying the conversation. Especially the connotations that Dr. Sachedina interject. One thing to Muslim women, I think there is a mentality that was formed that they are protesting their status and their lack of space without trying to take it. I am still, and anything I'm saying, I can back it up with very real stories. We went to a mosque with my wife and with some of our friends, and they told the ladies, go sit with the ladies. Where are the ladies? In the basement. They said, no, we are not sitting in the basement. We are sitting here. If you like to go to the basement, go. And they sat, and what happened? They brought the women from the basement to sit up with us. We need that kind of guts. Still, our sisters waiting for obnoxious men like myself to fight the battle and to get all the bad reputation and the scars. And I think that should stop because it is self-defeating. It is still, she is the subject that needs a man to defend her. So even if this man wins the battle, she did not win nothing. Muslim women should be assertive. Take your place. There was that lady, young college young woman. She was going to pray, and she was praying behind, and a man came to her and said, "This is not your place to pray. Go to other room." You know what she did? She said, "Allahu Akbar." And she started praying. What is he going to do? He will snatch her out of the prayer? No. So this is what I mean. That the second thing is a challenge, just a personal favor. I want to put it with you, with the panel, and with everyone here. We need to know what is this obsession that Muslim people have with sex. What is the issue? I made some people very angry in one of the countries I was at. They gave me their Islamic magazine. And I read the magazine, and they were very all glowing. What do you think about the magazine? I told them, this is the Playboy Islamic style. It is the other face of the coin. The Playboy is showing nudity and describing nudity, and all what you do is say, no, she should not expose her big organs and her big breasts like that. You are in the same thing. He is saying how nice, you are saying how bad, but the issue is the same. Yes. So what caused this obsession? Because we really need to treat it. I think it is a psychological disease that needs to be treated.
Well, I think if you look at there's I forgot who did this study, but they're talking about Muslims, and they said that 10 to 15% of Muslims are regular mosque attendees. That's 10 to 15%. So clearly, the mosques aren't addressing the needs of the community fully. I mean, I think it's safe to say that. Obviously, there's some communities that are doing great things, and I don't want to discredit that. But when I talk to, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. But when I talk to Muslim women, for example, I ask them, why don't you go to the masjid, to the mosque? And a lot of them say, I remember one person told me, she said, when I show up to the mosque, I don't feel like I'm going to the mosque. I feel like I'm showing up to court. And she talks about, she steps inside the mosque and the jury is like, we the jury, we find the defendant guilty of 3 strands of hair showing. Like, that's what it is. And again, I don't want to be too critical, because what you were saying before is, are you just going to say, well, I'm not welcome there, so I'm not going to go? Somebody has to take the initiative and change things. And Imam, you gave a khutbah about 2 or 3 years ago. I think it was in San Jose. You talked about how this problem with Muslims going to hookah bars and smoking shisha and going to bars and hanging out. And he said a lot of them, not to condone what they're doing, but a lot of them, they don't know where to go. They need a place to hang out and talk. Well, the mosque, to question earlier, what role should the mosque play? The mosque should be our country club. It should be our barbershop. It should be the chai house. Like, that should be the place where we can go, not only for prayer, but to hang out and say, okay, what are we going to do next? And there's communities that are starting to do that, but I feel like it's not enough yet.
I'm actually on, I hate to say this, I'm actually on another level. Maybe it's because I grew up in Brooklyn.
Right.
I don't think that it's appropriate to try to create a masjid that's all things to all people. It's not a barbershop. It's not a beauty salon. It's not a movie theater. People come there, you want to pray, you want to learn the Quran and so on, and then you go back out into the street and you do the things that you do.
Of course.
We have been trying, and the architects can show you the designs of the recent masajid. They have a gymnasium. Why? To protect our children from interacting with the other children in the community. They go to school with 97% of Muslim children go to public school. Right? Why not adopt the public school, make the public school a better place, and then you'll save your child and everybody else.
One thing about that khutbah, the reason I gave that khutbah is a brother came to me and said, I have this trouble. I go to bars and shisha bars. And then he said, I don't smoke shisha and I don't drink. But he told me the main reason I go there is because I'm lonely. I'm lonely. I don't think they can hear me.
He said, get a wife.
Yeah. Well, I don't think the community made it.
No, he and the wife are lonely. Him and the wife are lonely too.
They'll both be at the shisha bar.
Right. Well, okay, so we're complaining a lot.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a lot to complain about, right? I mean, every community has its own set of challenges and it's the things that it would like to see improve.
That's right.
What's going right? Where do we see mosques that are getting it right? Because there's a lot of them. There's a leading edge of mosques. I mean, I go to the Islamic Center of Southern California. It's a ray of sunshine. And I know that there are many mosques. I'm doing that. I know that there are many mosques like that, whether it's the Adams Center in Virginia or many others that exist around the country. In your experiences in the communities that you have traversed, can you share a story about a mosque or a community that's getting it right for those who are with us, where we can duplicate things that are going well and amplify those?
Well, I'm going to sit out until we get through this, because, again, my thesis is that where we'll have the real vitality is when the Muslim life is more than the masjid.
And that's where we're going next.
But I can tell you, there are a number of masajid that are getting it righter. But I want to remind you, we created something in America that I think didn't exist in other places, the mega masjid, where 40 years ago, the blacks were in one place, the Pakistani was in another, the Egyptian was in another. Then we created the paradigm of the Isna paradigm, the mega masjid. Everybody came to the masjid, no matter what your background was. And that was great, but we only came together for that 1 hour. That population in the mega masjid we've discovered something, even in the masajid that are very women-friendly or convert-friendly or whatever, that the core client of the masjid is the one I call the lammer. La. They are, no. They are the ones who are the judge, jury, and the executioner, right? They pray there 5 times a day. Maybe it's a men's senior citizen center sometimes, right? They're the core client. We can bring the politician in at Jumu'ah, but we can't bring them in the evening. Yes.
I'm going to cut you off because I want to get to positive. I want to get to what's going right. I want to get to the places that are.
I think these mega masajid are moving in the right direction, but they haven't taken the other 167 hours back. It is creating that wider engagement. I think you've listed a number of them. I moved to Sterling, Virginia, so that my family could be in walking distance of the Adams Center, because Muhammad Majid is one of my teachers. And my children see that masjid as a place that they can go to on their own. They can just walk from their house, and there are phenomenal youth directors that are engaging. My son did an environmental project for recycling in the masjid. Our masjid now has reduced its use of consumables as a personal contract by 30%. So it's greening, it's a greening community. There are many other communities that are doing these things.
Yeah, Edina, the experiment of the Open Mosque Day in California that the Shura Council is running, now it is the 5th year maybe, but this last year was phenomenal because it was kind of reached maturity, where a group of mosques are trained, and this is the beauty of it, or the uniqueness of it, to open the mosque for their neighborhood. They invite the neighbors, all kinds of neighbors. Like, for example, at the Islamic Center, good number of the neighbors will be Korean Americans. And of course, the majority are Christian and Jewish Americans, etc.
Sheikh, you know why I love you? Because you didn't say non-Muslim.
No.
Allahu Akbar.
Anyways,
Allahu Akbar.
I love you too.
Allahu Akbar.
But in addition to these sentimentalities, really the experiment was a smashing success about the number of people who came with one face and left with a better face. Came with one attitude and left with a better attitude. And this is because it was not done haphazard. Open your mosque and come and tell them Islam is good, which is the very troubling statement that we Muslims use. All the activities boil down to Islam is good. Congratulations, how come you are that bad? But anyways, we trained, we had a training course to the imam and to the volunteers in these mosques about attitude, about reception, and about the kind of questions you expect to be asked and how to answer them in a way that will not make the situation worse. If this model is effective, if it goes through the country, I think this is where we achieve so many things. People, our fellow citizens, are familiar with the mosque. They ask the questions on their mind, and they are reassured. All what our fellow Americans wanted to know is not the 5 pillars or what kind of zabiha you slay in Eid. They want to know, are you going to blow me up or not? That's the basic question. If you are not, I'm ready to sit and converse. If you are about to, goodbye. I go to the shelter. So.
All right, I'm going to move. I want to remind you, if you've got questions, I know that the ushers are moving around and I'm already getting a steady stream, so I'm continuing to integrate them. Now, this is, sadly going off of the last statement that you just made. Let's turn the page and talk about one of the most troubling issues that's, this issue of violent extremism and the string of cases that we continue to see taking place, most recently in Portland and Maryland. And regardless of there's 2 layers to this conversation, of course. There's the sort of FBI sting policy level, and then there's the level of violent extremism and the fact that it is happening one way or another. So the question that one of our audience members has, and that I'm going to add on to, is do you disagree with the notion that radicalism has roots in the mosques and that the youth who join Islamist extremists in Somalia, Pakistan, etc., get their message from their imams? So let's start off with that question, and I want to add the layer of the fact that just this week I think there's an interesting development that relates to this, which is that Imam Zaid Shaker released a letter to a would-be mujahid this week. What's the best way to translate mujahid? Freedom fighter is one way, yeah.
Or a
yeah.
person who would want to engage in jihad.
Right. Okay, so he released this letter this week that was a letter to a person who might be considering violence because of whatever anger or whatever issues they may have. This is an example, a bold example of one of our respected leaders tackling the issue head on. Imam Suhaib, I know that you have been a part of this, Imam Johari, Dr. Hathout, and many others. This summer, MPAC released a video in conjunction with you all and many other scholars called Injustice Cannot Defeat Injustice, that was precisely a message by Muslim scholars to Muslims on this issue of confronting the issue of violent extremism and the would-be mujahids head on. So I want to throw in one name in this mix as we think about this question, which is Anwar al-Awlaki. And how all of these sort of factors fit together and how we deal with this issue head on with the complexities on the policy level and on the community level.
May I start?
You may.
Okay. We were recently appointed by the UN Commission to look into de-radicalization program in Algeria, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. De-radicalization program. And I was invited by a certain foundation, I'll not mention them here by name, but these foundations wanted a person like me or somebody educated like me in academia to write a treatise against the jihad. And there was this simplistic view that if I wrote, as Abdulaziz wrote something against jihad, would be accepted by someone in the jail, let's say in Algeria or in Saudi Arabia. This is what I call the wishful thinking on the part of those who are working on de-radicalization program, because it is the imams in the mosque who are responsible to disseminate education, or I would say information about how we fight injustices. And the political agenda is quite clear. As long as, and I must confess this, as long as the Palestinian issue is going to remain unresolved at the international level, we'll have this kind of language and discourse emerging from a number of imams who are actually worried about their leaders, Muslim leaders, completely indifferent to the situation of the Muslim world, and are therefore, somehow rather conceding to the power of the superpower or superpowers, wherever they are. And therefore, I think we need to understand, where does the militant Islam come from? Where does the political Islam come from? And it certainly comes from those who are preaching to the community, especially those young minds. I get an email from Canada, what is my duty as a young Muslim to go and fight the Americans in Afghanistan? What am I going to tell him? If I'm an imam that's going to encourage him to go for jihad, then I would do that. Maybe I would say, yeah, your obligation is to Afghanistan, although you are a Canadian citizen. In other words, we are trying to somehow brainwash these young minds who are enthusiastic. And they do see, by the way, very much insecure in the American social universe. And therefore, that security gap is very much filled by those imams who can really give them, those preachers who give them some kind of alternative, Islamic alternative, which is quite attractive. And unless that kind of education is controlled from within the community, we'll always have a problem of extremism.
Okay. We have about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to ask each of you to keep your comments concise so we can keep moving forward.
Yeah, I raised my hand before you said that condition.
Well, you still have to keep it concise. Rules are rules.
Retrospect. number one, I want to defend, I am so protective of the word and the concept of jihad. I don't want them to force us to define it according to their vision.
Who's them?
Them,
The violent extremists.
yeah, Muslim bashers who wanted to tell us that jihad means violence and means killing the other unless they convert. They have their own definition and they want to impose it on us. This is why immediately after 9/11, within a week, I wrote my small book, Jihad versus Terrorism, and I was made versus in capital because those are two different opposing concepts, and I hope that in our discourses we defend that. We defend that we define what jihad is, not anybody else, and the jihad has nothing to do with what they are talking about. Having said that, I think also I will not only blame it on some pushers of violence in our community. We have to understand that there are very real grievances of Muslim people and Muslim youth who are seeing their people killed and maimed and stampeded all over the world and robbed of their dignity as human beings. So, and we tell them, no, it is your fault. No, it is, of course, anyone who does criminal act is his fault. But like any good criminologist, he will study the background and what resulted in that. We say when poverty is rampant, you expect robbery to increase. When we see injustice is rampant, you expect some misguided reactions to that. Then we need to understand then, and I think I mentioned it once, but again, we have to redefine Islam. People don't, and I don't want to generalize and say people, good number of us, good number of our people don't understand what jihad is and what the whole issue, what Islam is all about. Maqasid al-Sharia that Imam Suhaib mentioned, the goals of Sharia, which is preservation of life, mind, property, freedom of religion, and family. Those are global humanistic, unalienable rights of human being. And this is the crux of the matter. The mission statement of Muhammad ﷺ is mercy. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ. The mission statement of religions is justice. That Allah sent His messengers with books and scales, so that the reason of that is that people can conduct their affairs according to justice. Okay. This is we need to recapture this spirit, and this will need a revolutionary intellectual new look to Islam. I am not saying dump the heritage, but don't make the heritage holy.
That's right.
The heritage is the ideas of human beings that were the reflection of their time and the place. The time changed and the place changed, and so the reflections should change. Okay. And as long as we are trying, and I attended this conference, to see the ruling for organ transplant through fiqh al-Imam al-Shafi'i, we are still on the wrong path.
Okay. Imam Suhaib, I want to turn to you for a moment on this question, because I know that you participated in something in the UK called the Radical Middle Way that was in some ways connected to this idea of fighting extremism or preventing extremism. Can you weigh in here?
I'll make a few points. Number one, I don't think it's fair to say most of the masajid or mosques in America are preaching radicalization. I think it depends on the mosque.
Well, I think it's
few
to, yeah.
Right. But I think
mosques are kicking out extremists is the reality.
Yeah. I think what is happening is that you have virtual mosque online.
That's right.
Yeah.
Which young people, they might not even really know who they're speaking to. Anwar Awlaki was not effective in radicalizing youth when he was in al-Hijrah.
Yeah.
Anwar Awlaki became successful when he went online.
Yeah, I think also after he was tortured.
Yeah,
when he was with us, he wasn't like that.
I understand. That's what I'm saying. So what happened after the fact. Thirdly, a problem that I'm seeing is that, and I say this because I don't want to actually get myself into trouble, but I'll speak freely.
Why not?
I think that because I've been conditioned. Pavlov's.
I think we have a mic problem. Can you? Uh-oh. There we go. All right, can you summarize
Probably
what you
did
just
that
said real quick?
deliberately.
So I said, maybe on purpose, yeah. So I said, I think it depends on the mosque. I don't think most mosques are preaching that kind of message. And as I said earlier, that radicalization is happening online. That's my experience. Thirdly, the problem is that Muslim organizations continue to make radicalization a media cry. And maybe it's done in order to please other people, to make them seem as being normative and in the middle way and so on and so forth. And that actually is very counterproductive. Because what happens is you lose the respect of those people who are already having somewhat of a militant mindset. Our experience is that we've done it privately through email conversations or even actually phone conversations with like the young person who reached out to you. Because a lot of them are scared to talk about these things openly. I had a young brother contact me once and said, I buy into Anwar's message and you tell me why it's wrong. So we went, I think, about 8 or 9 emails back and forth. And then finally he said, you know, I was wrong. I'm going to open a soup kitchen in the ghetto, right? So he has the spirit of doing something good. It's just being redirected. Another brother contacted me and had similar problems. So I met him actually in a parking lot. Late at night, it was kind of where I was worried. And then we started talking, and basically he said to me, he said, you know, I always felt that the Prophet didn't teach us just to outright hate people. And he changed. So I think using it as a media ploy is how it comes across sometimes. And that's very counterproductive, whereas it should be something that's undercover in the sense that we're reaching out to these people, this opportunity for you to engage your ideas with scholars, but we're not going to put you, on TV somewhere and blast you around to others.
And I think empowerment is a critical part of that, because if you look at the guy who brought a bomb in his underwear, the Chuddi bomber as I call him, when he came on the airplane, there was all these stories coming out that were saying that after, like before this whole event, he used to go on forums finding Muslims like, I'm lonely, I'm looking for friends, and I'm looking at that. And so when you're 15, 16, 17, I think he was a little bit older, but like when you're looking at that, and when the community doesn't empower you, they say, you can't do that, you can't major in that, you can't do that. Then some extremist guy says, you guys can do this, you can lead, you're mujahideen, you are leaders. So when you're 16, 17, you have that teen angst, like, oh my God, this is awesome. I'm a hero, I'm gonna be a noble fighter, or something like that. So I think it's about empowerment, like you said, taking that energy, because people wanna do something, and just turning that positive and towards doing good in the community. And I think that's one way, of many ways, strategies, is really empowering our Muslim youth and telling them that you can lead, you can take initiative with these social service projects, things like that. And I think that is a powerful antidote to the extremists.
Go ahead.
This last Christmas Day, when Abdul-Muttalib was giving his version of what Muslims should do to resolve their conflicts at the conference called Reviving the Islamic Spirit in Canada, I was giving a speech, a call to nonviolent resistance for social change. There were 10,000 Muslims in that audience. But for some reason, the presentations about another way to wage this struggle is not reaching the population. I believe really that it's time for us to engage the process of saying to young people, if you want to make social change, we are committed to that social change using non-violent resistance. Now maybe some people say, oh, that's because you're a Negro and you came up through the civil rights movement and that's why you think like that. I'm saying, guess what? I read Gandhi, I read Abdul Ghaffar Khan. There's nothing cowardice about facing the enemy, speaking truth to power, and being unarmed and saying, I'm not going to exceed the limit. Horace, you sent me an email, you off camera, saying 83% of the people who are killed by the radical extremists are other Muslims.
Yes.
So I mean, who are they really working for? Right? They're hiding in the crowd after Jumu'ah in Pakistan or in Afghanistan because they're afraid to meet the enemy, but they're going to hide behind some women on their way from the market. We need to call them what they are and to engage in a notion that says war as we know it now would not be acceptable based on the understandings that I have from the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam.
I just wanted to make a small point. Earlier, you had asked about positive communities in the U.S., and I think one community that we often overlook is the online community. And so while Imam Suhaib Webb definitely brought up the issue of radicalization through the web, there's also the antidote is right there at the same time. It's a place where you can reach out to the scholars and the thinkers that are making positive change. They can come together in a community. And also to the question of empowerment and social change. I mean, if the internet's not a place to empower and to bring about social change, even definitely at a political level in terms of netroots activism and the role of like social media and so many of the major political happenings of our day, I think that's an element that we really need to keep emphasizing, the role of the internet.
May I?
Okay.
I
Yes.
just wanted to shed some light on something because Imam Johari, you are on the mark. However, the counter argument is usually but the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and to them sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when this means I knocked you down.
I got to come back for that.
Sure. Yeah.
Let me tell you, when people looking at this narrative, oh, this is how the Prophet ﷺ spread Islam, very quickly. He spent 13 years in Mecca, non-violent.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
he spent 6 years.
This was not my argument.
And Hudaybiyah, I mean, when we look at where the Prophet _, gained his success, it was in non-violence.
I want to tell you what I read they are saying, and some young people came to me with this argument, that the Prophet said, if you see munkar, you change it with your hand. If you cannot change it with your hand, it is with your tongue. If you cannot change it with your tongue, it is in your heart. Which means first you kick, second you curse, third you hate. Those are the grades. And the irony is that they missed the very word, to change it. The goal is the change.
That's right.
And if force is not going to change, and it is proven that it does not change anything except worst, and foul language will not change it, then the understanding of the hadith itself is twisted. This is why I keep coming back to that intellectual re-exploration of Islam. We played with words in a way that disfigured our religion. And we have to go to that and say, didn't he say change it? Are you going, all the models you mentioned from Martin Luther King to Gandhi to etc., they actually made a change. While the guys carrying the bazooka did not make a change except more misery. So which side should I land
Where's
on?
the maslaha?
Yeah.
We just have about 10 minutes left, and so I want to just get to one last topic, which has been a common theme among the few questions I have left in my pile, which is the issue of Islamophobia. With the level of vitriol against Islam and anti-Muslim bigotry at what feels like an all-time high in our post-9/11 life, there are many people who feel certainly overwhelmed or even paralyzed by the continuous challenges of, first we had to redefine jihad. Then we had to, in the light of the Park 51 Center debate, talk about what a mosque is or what a masjid is. And now, even more recently, the issue of Sharia. Sharia. Looking at even the law now on the books in Oklahoma that's being debated in the courts, but the way that Sharia is being used as the latest attack of how the Islamization, quote unquote, of America, not through warfare, but as the Islamophobes call it, lawfare, is now the next layer of the conversation taking place. So I want to think about what are better ways. What should we be doing to be able to engage these conversations on a national level and also on a local level around issues? And I'll use the Sharia situation since it's the most current as the starting point.
I think we are faced with the biggest challenge is that we are being represented by others. Representational discourse damages our ability to really communicate the right way of speaking about the issues that are particular to us. And I come back to the same issue that ultimately we ask the question, who speaks for Islam? So if Bernard Lewis is going to continue to speak for Islam, or somebody else is going to speak for Islam, then we need to have a counterpoise, to have a voice in Islam. And I think at the moment we don't have that authoritative voice representing what we would call an educated information about our own tradition. And I think that's a drawback. And there are so many voices that come from different sources. Hirsi Ali is talking about the rights of the women. I don't know, somebody else is talking about the rights of the women. And you know, the media is actually jumping at those people who are not actually. Irshad Manji, I don't know where she studied her Islam from, but she is the hero of the media. And we really need to combat that with our names coming first. And I think I go back to the very early comment that I made, that we need more and more PhDs in Islamic studies, sincerely attached, sincerely knowing Islam, to come forward and talk about our religion. And they will one day be recognized. America recognizes academic excellence, believe it or not. That's true. When you do well in academia, they will recognize you. They have no choice, because there's fairness in the system. They do see this, and they will recognize it, and I think this is where our battle should go. We should take our battle to the academia. That's where we prepare to come with those experts who speak for us. Sharia needs to be spoken about by some who know it, not Irshad Manji or Hirsi Ali or somebody else, you know. And these are the ones who are contacted. So we really need to move forward.
In
Hold on,
defense,
let
I
Asma
know,
go first.
even though Irshad and I differ with each other, I think she has the right to put her discourse, because that creates that place where we have the dialogue.
It's a marketplace.
But we are talking about the right, and the right that is actually determined by the media.
Indeed. Until we create our own media, we just need to I have my own television show, so I'm doing my part. Right?
All right. Asma.
Well, I think by the same token as creating more Muslim academics is also having more Muslim lawyers. I mean, especially in the context of the lawfare,
You need
right?
more Muslim doctors.
I think so.
We have enough of those.
Because they're big donors.
Hold on.
I mean, in the context of the Muslim lawfare, I mean, I think to understand that we're fully protected under the U.S. Constitution. I mean, the Oklahoma ban on Sharia, I mean, if it was to be challenged with the Constitution with a proper plaintiff and the proper claims, is completely cannot withstand our free exercise jurisprudence. And I think that brings up the point that we started this discussion with, this idea again of like the place where Muslim values meet Western values. And I think that the second you become that persecuted minority that has to use the law, and you fully realize the extent of the law and the benefits of it in terms of defining your freedoms, I think that also begins to show you the value of those freedoms. And that if you're going to use them for yourself, then you also have to be able to use them for people other than yourself.
Absolutely.
That's right.
I live in New York City, and in June, you know, the whole Ground Zero controversy, or whatever you want to call it, if you want to call it a controversy, in June, there was a big protest. A lot of people there were either ex-firefighters or people that lost loved ones on 9/11 protesting. I wasn't there for the protest, but I was hanging out with a friend of mine who lives nearby. And so we saw the protesters, and we saw 10 people take a break from the protest. And they're taking a break, and one of them was holding a sign saying, "Muslims don't belong in this neighborhood." Another guy was holding a sign saying, "Having a mosque here is like a punch to the stomach."
Yeah.
And what was funny to me was they were waiting in line at a halal food cart. And that's why in this country, I feel like people pick and choose what they're offended about.
That's right.
And when you talk about all these people that are spewing these things on TV, we live in a culture where whoever shouts the loudest is going to get the most airtime. Right. They're more than welcome to talk, but we need to step up to the plate and do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's lacking, and that's how you combat it. And it's not about responding and reacting. Like 30 mosques, we weren't trying to respond to anything. Okay, it's great, we can talk about these issues, but we were just trying to tell our own story, because so many people have tried to tell our story. It's time we tell our own. And that's how I look at it.
Sure.
Just to add, hope my mic is working now. I think Asma said something very profound, that this process actually is going to create a greater confidence in many Muslims' hearts about how the system works here. But the Park 51 controversy I think is a microcosm of a problem of leadership we have in America, where leadership doesn't have a mandate in the Muslim community. When I came back from Egypt, as soon as I got here, people were telling me, now you're a leader in America. And I said, how can I just was eating like fool and ta'miyah. I was just like eating, fava beans and bread in Egypt, and now suddenly I'm a leader of the
Much better
American
than the
Muslim
Pakistani food.
But seriously. And I think in a lot of ways, our leadership is bought by people that have money and influence, and it's not chosen by our community. That's right. Nor is it transparent. And this is at a mosque level, and I don't want to go back to problems, but I think Park 51 reflects a group of people, a small group of people, making a decision that impacted all of Muslims in America without really having consultation, not just with, imams, but with aunties, mothers. I mean, I know mothers who, after that decision was made, started to face it at grocery stores. Yeah. Their children were threatened at schools. This had a systemic impact on our community. So number one, I really believe, we didn't talk about it today, is the leadership of Muslims in North America, until it's straight and until it's transparent and until it's chosen, people are not going to have confidence in their organizations and officials. Secondly, instead of a voice, because I love what you're saying, we need professors. Oh, I'm with you. You're saying we need lawyers. I'm with you. I think we need voices, and this is what he's saying. Yeah. That we need, if you see the movie Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee, there's a very, very powerful moment in that movie, it's old school, so forgive me, where the Italian pizza owner who uses the N-word constantly, he keeps saying the N-word, and finally Spike Lee's character says to him, is Prince an N-word? And he said, no, Prince is a singer. He says, is Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan N-words? He said, no, they're the greatest basketball players on the face of the earth. So I'm sure that's what happened when they went and bought halal food from the most famous halal cart in New York City, right? 36. That the rhetoric changed. So we need to be able to appreciate capitalizing on rhetoric in America. And Frank Luntz has a very good book, not to plug him here, called What Americans Think Really. Read his chapter on religion. How Americans look at religion is very profound. So we don't just need imams, and I don't think it's just convert or American-born imams, because just like some women are the greatest carriers of misogyny, some converts to Islam are the greatest carriers of immigrant Islam. I think it's a mindset, but we have to appreciate creating and fostering rhetoric at all levels in order to kind of shape that discourse. People can see, wow, the guy you just bought that sandwich from is a Muslim, man. Do you feel like you got stuck, punched in the stomach, or do you feel, happy, so on and so forth.
All right.
Yeah. I do feel exceedingly hopeful. I really believe that after 9/11, I really was impacted by an ayah of the Quran, the 9th surah, the 32nd ayah. This is in Surah Al-Tawbah, where Allah describes, يُرِدُونَ أَن يُطْفِئُوا نُورَ اللَّهِ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ. They will try to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouth. So all of this anti-Muslim rhetoric and so on, but that Allah prefers to increase His light. لَوْ كَرِهَ الْكَافِرُونَ. And so while we were not doing our jobs in being willing to engage our neighbor, after the tragedy of 9/11, our neighbor came to us and said, we want to come to your mosque and see what you're doing. And we said, no problem, we're going to train our people, and we're going to do those things, we're going to embrace you. That others said, okay, on university campuses, we have to do a real outreach, because we've been doing a lot of in-reach. Only people we wanted to talk to are the ones who want to take shahada. Now we got to talk to everybody on the campus. That in the grocery store, this is something that we didn't want to do. People just want, I don't want to have to explain Islam every time I go to, but this community has had to edify itself, to learn what are the answers, to learn what are the arguments, so that we could reach out to our neighbors. And it has been overall a positive experience. People who have done, Aman, what you said, who have met another Muslim, their attitude is different. No matter what Fox News says. The Muslim that they know from the halal cart, he's a good guy. And I don't know about the rest of them, but I know based on what he told me about his religion, because I asked him and he shared it with me. That is a profound witness. That is what makes us in this society American. And I'm going to say this to you. There is another generation of Muslims that are unmasked, but they're not un-Muslim. that they're on Facebook, they're on Twitter, and they're talking about these issues, and it's wide open, and other people are joining the conversation, and the haters and the lovers are all in the mix.
Absolutely.
And as a result of that, it's widening this discourse, not for the old gray-haired people or no-haired people like, but there is a new generation that is really building this new infrastructure. The real challenge for them is, what will they build? Will they build the institutions that are necessary to house the generation that follows them? The question for us is a question of institutional building, whether it's media, whether it's social media, whether it's universities, whether it's scholarships, whatever it is, think tanks. What institutions will we build now, or will we become petrified and paralyzed by this episodic Islamophobia that we're experiencing? I think we will.
My last question, which you just segued nicely into, and if it's all right, I'm going to consider that your turn.
That's my turn.
So my last question is, walking out of here, having had this conversation, the range of issues that we've talked about, the range of challenges that we face, what is one thing that you either believe is your greatest hope for the next 5 years for our community, or that you believe is the greatest priority for our community within the next 5 years? And I'm going to give you each about 60 seconds to just go through and be concise about it, and then we'll close. So this will be our food for thought.
I pass.
Exactly. You laid out yours, I think, pretty well. Dr. Hathout?
I think from the two panels, I discovered how rich we are, because I'm very aware of how poor we are. So to discover how rich we are is very encouraging to me. And if we should have an agenda, a strategic agenda, Islam will progress for so many reasons. One of them is Almighty guaranteed that. But it will progress either we are the tools or we will be replaced. We are disposables. What we should at least do is not to delay the progress of Islam. And I am afraid that lots of things we do delay the progress of Islam. There is, with your dictatorial 60 seconds, I don't have time to...
What happened to democracy?
Exactly. There's no democracy.
But I'll just mention a very, very short story. In one of the cities, they opened a new mosque, and the mayor of the city decided to honor Muslims and come to the inauguration. What happened is the mayor of the city was a she, not a he. So the guys, number one, she wanted to shake hands, they didn't shake hands. Then they took her to the women's section. I felt that we are delaying the progress. Things like that.
Dr. Sachedina.
I think I want to be cognizant of the fact that our coming together like this is a blessing in itself. And our ability to open up and be willing to listen to one another. We've heard you through your questions. Gives me the hope that God has implanted this, as He has said in the Quran, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِقَوْمٍ حَتَّى يُغَيِّرُ مَا بِأَنفُسِهِمْ. God does not change the condition of the people, does not take away the blessing from the people until they begin to misbehave. So we need to behave ourselves and gather our act so that we can really move forward and move today, and I think use today's experience. The way I see it, I'm very hopeful as a template to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
So I think our top priority is the creation, the cultivation of leaders who are attuned to live realities of being both American and Muslim. And I know that, I know Edina founded a program, the American Muslim Civic Leaders Institute, that's definitely...
Didn't found, yeah.
That definitely, is the beginning of this sort of thing, but it's precisely those sort of authentic, organic, indigenous efforts that I think we need more of.
I think we tend to underestimate our own potential and our own creativity. And I call it the Uddin mentality, the whole idea of, oh, we need a noble leader that's going to rise up and lead us. You know, the Imams and MPAC and all these great organizations are going to do. And I think we tend to forget that we all have a role, regardless of what institution we're part of. And it's not about preaching, it's just about getting involved in engagement. And so I'm optimistic in this sense because I think we're starting to realize that, and I hope that more and more people realize, what role do I play, and what role do you guys play in this process? And that's what I'd like to see happen moving forward.
Thank you.
I would say that we face a very interesting challenge, that is to maintain our understanding of being progressive, but at the same time staying true to the broadest tenets of orthodoxy. And what you see maybe in the last 10 years were people who were very much engaged in fulfilling their religious responsibilities and negligent of their social responsibilities. On the other end, we find till now Muslim activists, Muslims who are very politically charged, Muslims who are into social justice, who don't even pray Fajr. And Allah says in the Quran, "Inni ma'akum la'in aqamtumus salah." I'm with you as long as you pray. At the same time, Allah orders us to be people of justice. So I think a challenge that we have is defining and articulating a message which is progressive, which respects this need to be somewhat liberal, if you will, but at the same time honors, in the broadest sense of the word, a compassionate, realistic, textual, revelation-based orthodoxy.
Yeah.
Fantastic. This conversation can and should go on, I should say, but unfortunately it cannot for the time being. I want to thank all of our panelists, Imam Suhaib, Aman, Imam Johari, Asma, Dr. Sachedina, and Dr. Hathout for participating and really, you know, we asked you to be candid, we asked you to come with it, we asked you to engage one another, and you have done that and much more. I think that if we have, inshallah, if God willing, if we have done anything here today, it is to begin or to continue a conversation around the issues that are impacting our local communities, our families, our neighborhoods, our cities, and broadly our country and our world. But I think for those of you who are with us in the audience here in person and also virtually and in other ways, the challenge for the rest of us is to think about how to translate these things. I think that many of us, and if you know, I've worked really hard to keep my thoughts to myself, and I will just offer one, which is that somebody has said something very profound to me once, which is that we should feel the fear and do it anyway. We live in a time of fear. We live in a time of trepidation. We live in a time of anxiety where Islamophobia seems to be our greatest enemy, and we cannot afford to exclude ourselves from these conversations, to self-seclude, that we must engage the public square, we must engage our neighbors. The responsibility that we have is higher than ever, but so too is the opportunity. And Allah offers us a mighty opportunity in the form of walking out of this space, walking out of this conversation and thinking what it is that we can do on a practical, small level in our day-to-day life. So we leave you with that challenge, and again, I thank you all. And for, again, housekeeping matters, we are now breaking for Maghrib prayer, which will again be taking place in the Hollywood Ballroom, just upstairs. If you go outside to the registration area, go to my right, and walk up the stairs. The Hollywood room is up there.
Now that's Islam in America.
Exactly. We are praying in the Hollywood room, that's right. And just after that, the doors to the banquet will open at 6:15. If you do not have your, if you have a reserved table, if you need your table number, go back to the registration table and they will help you out. Thank you all for being with us in person, online, and around the world. And Assalamu alaikum, may the peace and blessings of God be upon you.
Great job. Great job. Woo. Great job. Especially with these guys here.
Up next.